Hello everybody, welcome. My name is Colleen and you are tuning in to The Crackdown. Welcome everyone to the first ever episode of The Crackdown. Today we're going to be talking about the movie Beautiful Boy that released in 2018, and we're going to be talking about the deeper meaning behind it. But of course, before we start, I need to issue a disclaimer for both your safety and my safety that this part of the show may not be suitable for viewers under the age of 18. So, if you are under the age of 18, please. Alright, let's get right into it. So, over winter break, my sister and I decided that we were going to watch a movie on Amazon Prime Video because we were bored. It was a Friday night, and we were scrolling through the set of movies that they had available, and we found this movie called Beautiful Boy. And she had never seen it, and I had never seen it. But, we figured, okay, well, why not give it a watch? So we pulled up the description, right? And it was actually, it sounded interesting. It sounded like something that me and my sister could relate to. So we decided to watch the movie. And the intro, if you guys have never seen this movie, the intro music kind of sounds a little bit like this.
Beautiful, 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 beautiful boy.
To summarize the film for any of you who haven't seen it, it's about a guy named David Sheff, and he's raising a son named Nick Sheff. Nick Sheff is an extremely overachiever. Like, he is just over the top overachieving. He was an athlete, an artist, an editor for his school's newspaper. He had good grades. He had a full ride scholarship to the college that he wanted to attend. But he somehow found his way into substance abuse, specifically methamphetamine, and he became extremely addicted to it. And basically, the whole plot of the movie is David trying to help Nick, but Nick keeps constantly relapsing, and David ends up being fed up with Nick because no matter how much help David offers to his son just won't take it. His son is almost like using him for money and to buy drugs off the street. And even though Nick overdoses multiple times in the movie, he just doesn't want help. Like, he just keeps relapsing. And so by the end of the movie, David is extremely fed up with his son. He's done helping him. He doesn't want anything to do with the son, and he wants his son to figure out how to get over this addiction on his own. All right, I'm just going to state this now because I know many of you do not like spoilers. This next segment is going to be a spoiler. So if you do not wish to know the ending of this movie, please skip about 30 seconds forward so you don't spoil it for yourself. Basically, the movie ends with Nick shooting black tar heroin up his arm in a bathroom of a cafe, and he almost overdoses and dies. But by the grace of God and some random miracle, he ends up surviving, and he ends up in the hospital. At the end of the movie, there's actually a really cute scene where Nick and his dad, David, are sitting in white chairs right outside of the hospital in, like, a green lawn area. And Nick ends up apologizing to his father and crying in his arms. And it's a very sentimental clip. And then, at the end, the closing titles show that Nick has actually been sober for 8 years because the movie was based on a real story. Like, David Sheff and Nick Sheff were real people. Nick went through drug addiction, and Beautiful Boy movie was actually based on the book, Beautiful Boy. So if you guys want to read the book, you should go check it out. Now, I'm not sure if you guys know what the term social construct means, but that's okay because I'm going to explain it to you guys right now. If you guys don't understand what the term social construct means, you're probably not going to understand the next part of this segment. Social construct can be defined somewhat as like an idea that was created by a group of people in a society that has become a standard. So, like, for example, the social construct of parenting, where every parent wants to raise their kid to be successful and rich. And if they don't, they feel disappointed. They feel like they're failures as parents because their kids didn't make it up to the standard. Parenting is hard. Parenting isn't something that everyone can do, It's really hard. It's the struggle, the financial struggle, the mental struggle, the physical exhaustion. But parenting becomes even more hard when there's a standard that you feel like you're obligated to reach as a parent. And if you don't, society will look down on you and you'll just feel like a failure. I did some research for a while, and I actually stumbled upon an interesting article called Parents of Adult Children with Drug Addiction Dealing with Shame and Courtesy Stigma. The article was about a study that was done that interviewed a group of parents who were raising drug-addicted children. Not only were they interviewed about their feelings, but they were also asked to elaborate on how dealing with this situation has affected their social life. The results concluded that parents often felt guilty or shameful that their children ended up addicted, and even said that they felt like failures as parents. Unfortunately, I have some experience with drugs growing up. My parents, both my mom and my dad, were addicted to drugs, specifically methamphetamines and heroin and crack cocaine, all the world of drugs. And it's really sad that I have to grow up dealing with that, but I understand the struggle of trying to get someone to quit, trying to get someone to stop doing what they're doing, because it's actually really harmful. Like, I would constantly tell my mom that she didn't need to do drugs to make her happy. Like, she has her kids, she has her mother, she lived with her mother, we lived with my grandma at the time, and it's just really hard to keep offering advice and offering help to someone who doesn't want it. It's literally exhausting. It's actually physically and mentally exhausting. So I understand where David is coming from in this movie when he talks about, giving up on trying to help Nick, because no matter how many times he sends Nick to rehab, Nick just constantly relapses. And I honestly know how that feels, because I kept constantly trying to help my mother and she just would keep relapsing. And yeah, I don't know. I can definitely sympathize, with David in this part of the movie. Similarly, I had found another article when doing some research on this topic, and I figured that it would fit right into our conversation. The article is called Anxious Parents by Peter Stearns, and it talks about parenting when dealing with a child that does not live up to the social construct and the standard that our society sets, and how it can, be stressful for the parents. Not only does he make this excellent point, but he also creates the argument of the anxiety that comes along with being a parent and raising a child, and I just thought it was a good idea that he brought this up, because I obviously don't have any experience with parenting, but I do know that my mother was very, very stressed raising us, all 5 of us. I am a family of 7. I'm the oldest of 7. And I know it was very stressful for her, because honestly, I don't think I would have been able to do well in that scenario either. Honestly, I can completely empathize with David, because I know what it feels like to be in a situation like that, and I believe there is ample justification for why David feels how he feels. However, there are always 2 sides to a story, and we can't just forget about Nick's side of the story. Nick is a drug addict and struggles with sobriety, and sobriety is not something that can just be easily achieved, especially on your own. As I was casually roaming around the internet, for some more statistics on teenage drug abuse and whatnot, I came across an article that had quite literally exactly what I was looking for. It was called "Why is Teenage Drug Abuse on the Rise?" and it was written by Sierra by the Sea. If you guys didn't know, Sierra by the Sea is a rehabilitation center, and their main focus is sobriety for struggling addicts. They also discuss the fact that teenagers begin to use substances because they either feel left out or they feel like they're not good enough, and they believe that these substances, such as drugs and marijuana and methamphetamines, can make them feel better about themselves because of this euphoric feeling that they get when they actually become high. In the film, there's actually a scene where David finds Nick's notebook, and it's a notebook of his drawings of when he was high. Instead of explaining it, because it's very difficult to explain, I'm just going to insert a clip right here. It's obvious, as you can see in the clip, that Nick's thoughts are just very scattered. His drawings are very scattered. There's a lot of black scribble clouds. And honestly, I want to say that his feelings are almost justifiable due to the fact that when you do drugs that are so addicting, such as methamphetamine, heroin, crack cocaine, they actually alter your brain to where you cannot live without them. That's what the saying comes from, where they say, if you do it once, you can never go back. Lately, teenage drug abuse has been on the rise, on a significant rise, and it's probably due to the fact that drugs are so easily accessible, especially in different states like Arizona, where weed is legalized, and a lot of other drugs like narcotics are not legalized, but opioids are. Because the drugs are so easily accessible, it is so easy for kids and young teenagers and young adults to access these drugs on the streets because there aren't surveillance cameras everywhere you go. And to add, being sober and staying sober is physically and quite literally impossible when drugs like narcotics are roaming the streets everywhere and they're just so easily accessible because there's not enough reinforcement. I got interested in other people's points of view, so I decided to look for a movie review on Beautiful Boy. I found a really good review on RogerEbert.com, and if you guys don't know what that is, it is a professional movie review and literature review website. And the review was called Beautiful Boy Movie Review and Film Summary. In her review, Chrissy Lemar mentioned a very good point that I wanted to discuss. She mentioned the fact that the movie had consistent flashbacks, and that it could sometimes be confusing to the watcher when trying to keep up with the plot. When I first watched the movie, I also thought the same thing. I was oftentimes confused because I couldn't tell, what part of the movie was showing and where the plot was going. But I finally realized that when they switched back to the present tense and past tense, I could figure out, where the plot was going. Like, I figured out what was going on in the movie. At first thought, I was like, oh, okay, well, maybe they just decided to do it like that because they really wanted to emphasize Nick's backstory and what had happened while they're explaining the story of Nick in the present tense, if that makes sense. But then I started thinking, and I was like, wait, this could be wrong, but I'm kind of giving the vibe that, it could be a description of Nick's mind and how chaotic it is. Because when you first watch the movie, it's almost like guaranteed that you're going to be a little bit confused. Because me and my sister, we were like dumbstruck. We didn't even know what was going on because of the flashbacks. So I thought, okay, maybe this is an accurate representation of Nick's mind and how chaotic it is in his mind. And obviously, no one's perfect. I could be wrong, but that's just what it came off as for me. If you got this far, that means that you've listened to almost the entire first episode of The Crackdown, and for that, I owe you a huge thank you. But before we go, I would just like to add a couple things. Honestly, growing up with drug-addicted parents was kind of upsetting for me because I now am forced to deal with the trauma and the mental health issues due to the negligence and abuse that I went through as a child. Due to that, I can understand why David ended up giving up on, helping his son towards the end of the movie, because I had also given up on helping my mom with, her substance abuse and addiction. To add, raising a child that doesn't reach the standard, quote unquote, can be very stressful and, disappointing to the parent, and it can even ruin the parent's social life. However, I would like to emphasize that drug addiction is a disease. No matter how much you try to refute it, no matter how much you try to say that it's not, and you can make all these arguments and claims, drug addiction is a disease. No matter how hard you try to disagree with me, I just will not stand. You can go look it up on Google, you can go look it up on Safari, whichever website you use, doesn't matter. Drug addiction is a disease. And the only way to overcome it is to get help. You cannot become sober and live your life in sobriety without help. With that being said, if there are any of you out there that are struggling with substance abuse and addiction and need someone to talk to or need someone to help you out, I am here. You can always talk to me, and I have a lot of other websites that you can go to. There are addiction helplines. Sierra by the Sea, as mentioned earlier, is a drug rehabilitation place. Their phone number is on the internet. You can call them, whatnot. Thank you guys for tuning in to The Crackdown, and we'll see you in the next episode.